everybody, and thank you for coming today. We are thrilled to have Dan Friday, glass artist extraordinaire of the Lummi Nation, who does incredible work in glass, solid, sculpted, and blown, and influenced by Italian techniques, and just there aren't enough words, is all I can say. So I'm going to let Dan use his words more than me. Thank you, Dan, for coming.
Haishka. Haishka, thank you to the Bainbridge Arts and Crafts. My name is Dan Friday, or Kokol. I'm a member of the Lummi Nation, or the Weklami people in Bellingham. The show with my sister, Ray Friday, who's also showing and not speaking today. But I'd always like to beat her drum because she's not the kind of person to get up and talk about herself. I guess that's my job. But yeah, like I said, my name's Dan. I come from the Lummi Nation. In this picture here, you can see Lummi Island in red. It's part of the San Juan Island chain, or the Strait Salish as it's known. Most people are really familiar with Coast Salish, which is the territory moreover, but the Strait Salish kind of pertains to southern Vancouver Island and the San Juan Island chain. The Lummi people are not actually from Lummi Island, they're from San Juan Island on the west side. English Camp is what it's called now, but that's the first village of the Lummi people. And their connection to the Coast Salish people or the Mish people, the survivors of the flood, where the tribes have kind of spread through the Puget Sound, are now kind of housed in the Lummi Reservation, which is the small peninsula that you can see just to the right of Lummi Island, where there's not a whole lot of Lummi people, if I'm being honest. This is my sister Ray, and my story in glass. Although we got started in glass completely independent of each other, it was kind of an odd phone call. I called home and I said, hey, let me talk to Mom. What are you doing? I've been out of the house for years. We don't talk much as siblings do sometimes. And I said, I got a job at a glass factory. And she's like, oh, you fucker, how'd you do that? I've been trying to blow glass for 2 years. And then the kind of rest is history. Our path in glass together has been, I'm really grateful to have a show like this because, working with my sis is great. This is my family, my brothers and sisters, my cousin, my auntie Pauline Scala, the killer whale. She's a great historian and oral tradition keeper of our family. This picture is of my great-great-grandfather, Haytaluk Ossium, and his name is Frank Hilaire. His current name that you would know in the books, but Haytaluk and his family here, Agnes Haumea, is actually half Hawaiian, and there's a great unknown story of the Puget Sound and the Hawaiian community, the indentured servants or slaves that were left with Captain Cook, and how they really worked for the Hudson Bay Company and a lot of the Puget Sound and a lot of the places, Kama, Washington, or Friday Harbor, named after Puale Joe Friday. So we have a Hawaiian vein in our family, and it's a big, large unknown history of kind of the Puget Sound area is how it was shaped. And actually at English Camp, that first village of Swatan, first village of the first man of Lummi, that's actually where the English or the Pig War was fought on San Juan Island, which is another thing. And in 1860, in that area, when the war happened, all the Hawaiians moved out of the Puget Sound area to what was Hawaii Town in Vancouver. And then the steamship travel became available. A lot of the Hawaiians moved back to Hawaii. So in this picture, it's really, I like to point out the haute couture of the day. They're wearing Coast Salish blankets, and you can see these are just some really fine examples. Haytaluk, in this picture you can see here, he was from the old world. He was a really powerful man. Haytaluk is a really strong name, means seat of the people. He was not a chief, but a spiritual leader of the Lummi people, and he lived in this this time like a foot in both worlds. He grew up in his longhouse. He raised 22 kids. And when his oldest son, Richard, died, he raised his 12 children too. He had 3 wives, one being my great-great-grandmother, Agnes Halmea, like his primary wife there. And you can see, I'll point out in this slide, the picture of the Hilaire bear on the drum. Really quick, that'll come back up. This is him and what's called a Nootkan style canoe. These were the really Nuchal Nuth or Nootkan style. These were like the Toyota Prius of the day. Like everybody, this is how you get around, you know. And this picture is of the Setting Sun dance troupe. You can see Frank Hilaire in the back and my great-grandfather, Joseph Hilaire, Kokot, who I share the name with, in the very front. And this dance troupe, you know, my cousin's production company and film company still carries the name Children of the Setting Sun today. My great-grandfather, Kokot, was a story pole carver or totem pole carver, and I'm really honored to carry his name. It was given to me. It's a really highly esteemed name in our family, and I share the name with one other person, my cousin Joe, and it means Story of the War Club, or the version of my name means storyteller, so it's kind of appropriate. This is him and my great-grandmother, Edna Price. She's from Nisqually. And these pictures, you know, I share these pictures, you know, because a lot of people don't have pictures of their family that go way back or have this story, and so many Native people, you know, struggle to find their identity or their history or their culture, or I feel like one of the things that Native people that are still have survived, we carry this, you know, we're what's survived from our ancestors who may or may have not made it. And I feel like a lot of people struggling with their identity in this world today that tells them where they're from is bad and who their parents were inherently bad. I'm American, not with a Confederate flag, but American, the group of people that as a whole represent what's the ideals of inclusion of all the different kinds of people. And we all have these families, and a lot of people don't have that connection to their history, or they don't, you know, I mean, I carry my ancestors with me. My ancestors still see me, and I just feel really grateful for that. My work is with knowing that I would want them to be proud. This is a picture, this is actually in Quinault, right here out on the peninsula. Joe Hilaire with one of his story poles. This one actually went to the Whatcom County Courthouse, I believe. This is Cousin Harry, because I got jokes. You got to keep it light, because you know what I mean. It can get serious when we're talking about all this stuff. But I do feel really grateful to have this tribal history in the area, and I think that as denizens of the Northwest, all the people that live here, we are lucky to have this connection to a still surviving Native culture that has survived. It's survived floods, it's survived famine, it's survived colonization, all the things that it's survived to still be here. This is the Stomach Canoe Races, which happens in July. It's been going on for hundreds of years. It happens every July. It's open to the public. You should come see. So many people, as I've traveled around the states and the world moreover, with through glass, it's kind of been a weird journey, but when I go to the east coast of the Washington, of America, and all the names of the streets are named after the tribes or chiefs or all these things, and I don't see Native people. They just don't. Some of those were the first impacted by the Manifest Destiny and the move westward. The Lummi Treaty, the Point Elliott Treaty, is one of the last treaties signed in America. And so just by that timeline of being one of the their culture was allowed to survive a little more. And the fact that like in the Pueblos and in the Southwest, and the fact that there still is an indigenous population here that I feel like I feel really fortunate to be from an area that still has that. This is a piece of glass. It's kind of hard to see. This is a cameo cut by my sister. This is my sister working at Pilchuck, where we both started sort of working in glass, and you know, about 26, 7 years ago. This is a piece of hers. This is over a ton of glass. And again, I like to beat her drum because she won't get up and be talking about herself. But this is, she's an amazing glass artist, and just another. I feel really fortunate to have her in my life. I started as a fisherman, as a mechanic, went to trade school. I had tow truck and hot rods. I was into all those things, and I walked into a glass factory when I was 20, and I kind of knew that was what was going to change the course of my life. Like going to Pilchuck really soon after, about 6 months after, meeting Preston, working on the totem pole project here, and just working at Pilchuck kind of gave me the opportunity to see working artists in glass and to see what was possible. When I walked into that factory, we were making small gift shop items. And I've always been an artist. I've always worked with my hands, and I saw a way out of what I was doing. The guys, I was trained to be a repo man. The people I worked with hated themselves and their job. And I was just like, I need to be creative in this way. And gave me a chance to meet people like my friend Nancy Callan. We're making some work for Wendy Murayama, amazing artist out of San Francisco. And the Pilchuck reality, and working very soon after, in about 99, I met Dale Chihuly and started working with Dale at the boathouse on Lake Union, where I still work today. And he's been really supportive of my career. Dale's been a great mentor and an example of what working in glass and being inclusive can really be. It's great to work as an artist, to have a job, and the boss's checks aren't bouncing right now. So it's great to have a job like that. But I think just being able, glass, what I really love about glass is it's an immeasurable physical thing. So working as a job, it's not like an objective truth, but it's like you can either do it or you don't. Glass is really tricky. It's either broken or it's not. You've either pulled it off or you haven't. And I think that, like, I always use the analogy of being like a musician, to be like being a glass blower. Like, you can't read a book about how to play guitar or violin. It's just literally thousands of hours. And working with someone like Dale, working in that cottage industry, that apprenticeship sort of existence, it kind of gives you it exposes you to things you don't know you're really being exposed to in the moment. And then when you cross that bridge, you're like, I'm a little more familiar with this. These are pieces from some of my first show in 2001, I believe, with Terrence Guardapi. This is my first fishing boat from Ruben, my uncle. I actually named the boat the Rubinator, but it didn't fit. But that's my Uncle Ruben. These are some of my first pieces, blown. My first show was with Terrence Guardapi, who's another good friend and Blackfoot artist at Daybreak Star, or formerly Fort Lawton in Discovery Park. As a mechanic, some of my early work, you can kind of see the gears and that reference. I was really working on a lot of gears in that piece. These are like the gears of time, or the gears in the universe sort of series, how we kind of are right where we need to be as the universe hums along. You might be standing right where you're supposed to be. So canoe paddle, this is from that show. These pictures aren't amazing because these are this is the 1 megapixel digital camera right here. But these are called serenades. It's called This Land Is. It's a fully glass musket. This piece is called Trail of Tears. This is from 2000. This is at Pilchuck in my cabin. I had an owl come. I found an owl in the road, and it came and stayed with me before the wildlife rescue was available. And then it flew up to the window. It turned out it wasn't as hurt as when I found it hit in the road. And I opened the door, it flew out. But it came at the end of a week of me making owls. And I'm like, well, I can't always read the writing on the wall, but I'm going to take this as a sign. And I kind of continued on that path. These are some of my owl totems, and you can see one in the show here. They're solid glass, and I don't know if you can see on the wall, but a lot of my work is solid sculpted, as opposed to the blown sculpture, which a lot of glass artists do. But I love how it catches the light. It eats the light. It has that lens effect, and it just is glass. And some of my other sculptures, like the anchors, you can tell have that more opaque. They could almost be ceramic sort of finish. But I feel like if you're going to work with glass, I like to highlight the material of glass. This is the Hilaire bear that I showed you in that first slide of my great-great-grandfather. And these are some of the bears I make. You know, we have the bear family that we come from, the bear clan. And these are, the first ones had legs, now they don't, because I like them to be as glassy as possible. And I just felt like it's a great, you know, a lot of my sculptures are like silhouettes or suggestive. I don't really go into the hyper realism. I feel like that's that trade-off between making super realistic and sometimes you lose the fact that it's glass. I like to let the glass kind of tell me a little bit. I mean, glass is always kind of like informing you of what you can get away with. There's like, oh, you've pushed it too far, or that sort of thing. This is a lightning bear. It's a Colchon bear, just very similar to the one in the show. Colchon, Mount Baker, as many of you in the Northwest know. This is a raven totem, raven comb. These combs are actually loom combs for weaving to pat down the row. This is the Wecklamy comb. Wecklamy is the place of frogs, or is the name of the Lummi longhouse now, the Wecklamy. This is my great-grandfather, Joseph Hilaire again, and he's carving a totem pole in Pioneer Square. This is great because just out of complete coincidence, the building over his shoulder in that very window is, I'm working with an architect firm there called L&M, but that's the Norton building in a really historic building at Pioneer Square. And this is a book written by Scala, or my auntie Pauline Hilaire, about my great-grandfather and his totem poles. This is the last standing totem pole of Joseph Hilaire. It's in front of the Whatcom County Courthouse, and it's about 90% fiberglass. It's been restored multiple times. And my last show here at Bainbridge Arts and Crafts was with Ed Carrier, OCM, an esteemed elder, and just a living, just a living legacy. He remembers watching my great-grandfather carve out here at Quinault and on the peninsula. And my grandfather would sell his totems for $10 a foot. I sure wish that our family had some of those heirlooms or some of those things to pass on, but mostly they've returned to the earth, unlike this fiberglass pole. And with that being said, like after studying at the Corning Museum of Glass many times, and I've had a few residencies there, and this is the bust of Akhenaten, and it's about 3,500 to 4,000 years old. And it could have been made yesterday, and it's made with glass. And although glass is a super fragile material, it's also resilient. These pieces I made today will be around long after I'm gone, and potentially millennia. Being able to tell these Coach Taylor stories in glass brings me great pleasure. As my grandfather's ethereal poles, something like an ice sculpture, as they return. And some people might argue that you don't restore totem poles in Alaska or in Vancouver Island. They think that that's just the pole's journey, is that it returns to the earth. They're just these transcendental sculptures. But these ones, my totems made in glass, will be around long after I'm gone. This is a forager's pole. It's got a basket and a morel, a raven, a bear. I always use the bear a lot. This is the full circle totem, which kind of speaks about the riparian vegetation, the circle of life, the river ecosystem as they're trying to reestablish these salmon spawning grounds. They're doing a lot of dam removal right now. They're also finding that the wildlife needs access to the riverbanks when the salmon die. They drag the carcasses up into the bank. The strong river bank is made strong by not logging up to the edge of the river, not having fences at the river, allowing that ecosystem to thrive, because they're finding one continuous symbiotic circle, allowing the wildlife up. when the roots of the tree hold the river together, the rivers don't wash out the banks and silt up the spawning gravel, and in turn the salmon bodies decaying, keeps that vegetation, keeps that bank true, because as we know, rivers like to travel. That's a full circle totem, and this is kind of putting a totem together, and you can see kind of what happens here. I spent a lot of days making the parts, but on one of these big pieces, they're all made on the end of a pipe, and they're all assembled hot. And I have a team of about 4 or 5 guys and gals helping me out, and it is it's no small feat. And as a glass artist, you are one of the things I would learn from Dale is you're really dependent on the people you work with. And I'm not in my youth and as an artist before I came into glass, I wasn't like a great communicator, but you really realize that's, again, that band analogy, like that musician analogy. You can put 2 virtuoso musicians in a room and they might not be in harmony, or it takes a minute to get that relationship. And so all these glass pieces are made with a team. I'm really reliant on my team, and although I may be the designer, I'm not necessarily, anybody could break the piece at any time. I'm really reliant on these other people. And that's what I really love about glass. Most people that just see the finished product, the glass artists are often really enamored with and in love with the process. And when things go well, it's like when we had an awesome set, it's like getting something in the first recording. You're like, oh yeah, high five, we got it all in one take. And that's something that a lot of people don't see. And that's another reason why so many artists are drawn to that community that kind of comes with glass. This is this is Chi Topi, or Aunt Fran of the Lummi, the venerable auntie of the Lummi Nation. She's sitting on some of her mountain goat wool blankets. Some of these are in the Smithsonian. She's doing some basket weaving. And her son is the hereditary chief, Chief Salit, or Bill James, of the Lummi Nation. And she was a huge cultural purveyor for us. She was one of the language bearers, one of the language bearers of Straight Salish particularly, and Coast Salish. The language, as my great uncle would tell me, his time in residential school, he would say it was beaten out of us to where when we would hear the language, you'd get physically sick and you wouldn't speak it. They'd whoop you with sawgrass. I don't know if you know what that is. And these little rebels, these little weaving circles of aunties kept these traditions alive. And so these are the heroes of our tribe, these are the people, the unassuming weaving circles that kept these traditions, that kept the names alive, the connections, the family relations as the families were separated. They really, it's really tragic. You can read more into that, but people like this are really inspirational to me. These are some of my baskets. This is a berry basket. This is a smoke basket. I started this series of Aunt Fran's baskets about 3 months after she passed away. And she was largely helpful in me finding my voice as an artist, or she gave me that. I'm like, Auntie, look, I've been working for, Dale Chihuly. Who's that? Well, he's this amazing glass artist and he's doing a lot of stuff. And, she's like, well, where's your work? And I'm like, well, but I work for this guy. He's amazing. And, it's just really hard to get into. She's like, well, where's your work? And I'm like, well, Auntie, it takes a lot to get into, and everybody I work with has a college degree from some place with their nose in the air. And she's like, I'm an artist. I don't need people's permission to make my work. We create things with our hands. It's what we do. It's what we've always done. And you need to hurry up and start making your work. And this is about 12 years into my glass blowing career, I guess, as a hired gun, as a glass, I'd been making work, but it really forced me to take it a little more serious and have another look at it. I had just gotten sober I guess this is probably about 13 years ago now. And that's really when I started making the basket series. This is a video, you can see that teamwork again, how dependent I am on the crew to, for my vision, but also it's such a process. We're rolling up a fused mosaic of glass. We'll cap off that can of glass. And if you've ever seen like scrimshaw, where they rub ink in the scratches of ivory, I do this thing where I sift black powder in between the individual canes and sort of wipe it away. That really highlights the individual pieces. I take another big gather over it. And then this is kind of one of these moments that's like frozen in time with glass where, you know, Taylor's turning the pipe, my good friend Greg Owen, rest in peace, is blowing in the pipe, and I'm kind of affecting the bubble. And it's really a harmonizing event. It's like, it's like having a dance partner, you know what I mean? It's really easy to step on each other's toes if you're not in sync. I put a little blue piping on the lip and then break the piece off and start again. This is my sister putting together one of the first baskets we worked on together. I wish I would have kept that one. This is the corn basket we made as a commission for some people in Santa Fe. And these are a lot of these other baskets. And very soon after I started making these baskets, it kind of became my quest to reach out to other Native artists because I realized what an amazing position I had been in working with Dale. Such a unique place for me to kind of stumble into. This is the Evergreen Longhouse. I don't know, I'm standing with a group of really esteemed elders, and the only reason I'm there is because I know how to blow glass. But this is from a teaching, this is from the Pacific Rim Indigenous gathering that we had at the Evergreen Longhouse, the House of Welcome, or the Squigwiyalt, started by my great aunt, Mary Ellen Hilaire, who's an amazing woman. I'm really fortunate to come from a long line of strong women. Haytawit Osium is her name. And, you know, at the Longhouse, I met carvers from Nisqually, Sahalish, Skokomish. This is Hala Howanut Old Peter, or Hala Peterson. And you can see her Thunderbird basket that we're working on there. And this is a residency at the Tacoma Museum of Glass. This is Auntie Lillian Pitt of Warm Springs, kind of helping her make some baskets. But that's what's brought me so much pleasure, is being able to share glassmaking with other Native artists and in the community at large. So my sister Ray and I at the Burke Museum archives studying. They have an amazing collection there. And I know that repatriation is definitely appropriate, but I also think that it's great that there's a public place where Natives can see these artifacts, aside from the inter-tribal politics of, you know, having one of your aunts who doesn't get along with the other 50% of the family having something in their closet that you can't see. I think that a lot of these artifacts, I think there's a balance somewhere that it's nice to have a place to go study these things. This is a clam basket, a Lummi clam basket. And this is a basket my sister made with bullet shells instead of cast from one of my dad's bullets from Vietnam. It's woven steel and copper. And yeah, it's been great being able to study it, like the Field Museum in Chicago. And I think that a lot of that work should be repatriated because it sits where no one can see it and is inaccessible. But I think the Burke Museum does a great job of making that available. This picture is of Haytaluk, Frank Hilaire, my great-great-grandfather, Osium, and Chief Martin at the time. This is in 1890. This is a really important picture, a really pivotal picture, because in this picture, it's hard to see, there is a reef net model between them. You can see the anchor stones in the front. Those are actual anchors, but the reef net, the small canoes, the shwala, or the reef net, is the shwala is like represents the female energy or the womb, and then this ladder of ropes that comes up. This picture is really important. This is a drawing of it, which might be easier to see. It kind of creates a false floor. They create this channel in the islands, and as the salmon migrate, they swim up the ladder or the false floor between the two canoes, and they draw the canoes together to catch the salmon. This picture, like I said, why it's so pivotal is this is when, in 1890, this was the main thing of commerce for the natives here, was to trade salmon with the settlers. It was a currency. It was kept them viable in the economy at the time. And sharing this technology spawned the commercial reef net fishing industry, or the canning reef net fishing industry, and consequently they made it illegal for natives to reef net fish in all in Canada and Washington. So that's why this picture, where they're sharing that technology, the founders of reef net fishing is the Straight Salish, and that's, I mean, boy, I wish they probably thought they would have thought about sharing that again. This is reef net fishing in 1890 off Cherry Point, which is now in 2016, the U.S. government allowed the Lummi tribe to start reef net fishing at Cherry Point again. But it's one of those things, it's a big part of our history. This is a Tsien, or a reef net anchor, that is at the Brick Museum in their collection. And these mark the, as they do, like so much of these, like the totem poles that return to the earth, all this stuff has been lost to the tribes. But now as they do excavation underwater, like outside Haida Gwaii, they can find villages 400 feet under the ocean. They can find these reef net sites, the hereditary reef net sites of like all the tribes here. Like, look, they could prove that this is where we were, these piles of anchor stones. And this is one of the anchor stones from the museum, and this is one of the ones I make in glass. It's woven cedar bark rope, which would have been traditional. And another thing, like, people don't see the teamwork that goes into glass blowing. People often don't see another thing that is unseen is, for me personally, this kind of work is just weaving 6 feet of rope. It is an amazing task. And this is all these people must have been doing just to sustain themselves. Child labor wasn't a thing. Everybody pitched in, and to weave thousands of feet of rope. It's like, this is a bridge for me, or this is a connection for me to my ancestors. And that's a really rewarding part of this work for me. These are more anchor stones. This is a shunol, or the salmon, a sockeye. These, like on the wall behind you, these are blown. I think in 4,000 years of glass making, some of the first things that are made are small coil mandrel glass fish, and then you just continue down the lineage of glass making for 4,000 years. And everybody has made some version of a fish. Well, this is mine. I made a lot of ugly fish to get here, but that's part of the process. This is a small video of making a fish, and you can see that teamwork sort of thing again. First I blow a bubble. A lot of them have cane on them. I add a solid head, which is really that nod to my appreciation of solid glass sculpting. But it was a way for me to make them full size, make these giant salmon, because if I were to make them solid, it's just like almost an unachievable feat. I dip the tail in a fresh ladle of glass. That's kind of a move I've coined there, and that molten glass is kind of how I finish it. I kind of sculpt the tail out of that, and put the final touches on it, and then with just a little drop of water, I sort of, that tension in the hot glass and cold water creates a small crack, and we literally break the pieces off. And so that's just an insight into how fragile glass is. Even when it's hot, it's still one of those like challenging materials to work with. This is C. Solanus, or Doug Burgess. He's a young Haida man who has been helping me for many years. He's from the Hilltop Glass program. He's putting the finishing touches on the Shwala that we hung at the Bellevue Art Museum. This is the entrance to the Museum of Northwest Art, and this kind of has a close-up of the Shwala. What you can't see is there's multiple colors because it took many different families to weave in. The Shwala was like a binding governance between the families before there was a Lummi nation or a Lummi tribe. After the Treaty of Point Elliott, these families came together and worked on a common goal of catching these fish, and that's what really brought them together. And so in this model, I've kind of dyed each of the portions a different color because this was made by my sister, my mom, a bunch of people helped me with this. But you can see, I really like to point out the hoop. the willow bark hoop at the end of the schwalla or the womb, and that allows the chief of the salmon people or the tip of the spear to escape every time. And that built-in mechanism of conservation just doesn't exist in deep sea bycatch when they throw away 90% of what they catch because it wasn't what they were fishing for. That sort of, or it becomes cat food or dog food or whatever it is. But that built-in mechanism of conservation is something that you won't see in commercial fishing these days. That's the tip of the spear to the right. They kind of swim in this arrow, this spear-like pattern, and allowing those big genetic breeders to escape every time was just that reverence that we had for the salmon. And the first catch of the season, they would stop fishing for a week and let a week's worth of salmon swim upstream, and then they would start fishing. They'd potlatch and ceremony on the beach, and I just hope that we can find a balance to preserve fishing for my great-great-grandchildren when they're telling a story at Bainbridge Arts and Crafts. This is the entry. This is a further view of the schwalla. This is my longhouse at Mona. You can see that the story poles or the storyboards of a longhouse, traditional Lummi longhouse, the grains of the female are really straight and the strong ones that hold the house up, and on the right side of the longhouse is all of the bent grain ones, and those are the male side, and we really are dependent on those matriarchs to kind of hold the house together. This is a Kolshan bear. It's kind of some of my exploration into neon. This is a Salish spirit. This is We Are Still Here. Is a headdress of eagle feathers, cedar bark. This piece is Red-Faced Dancer. This mask is my cousin Ron Hilbert, Vi Hilbert's son. Missing and murdered indigenous woman, this piece. This is a famous painting by Paul Kane, an English painter. When he first came to the Northwest, this is of Cowichan women weaving a Coast Salish blanket, like you saw in that early slide of Frank Hilaire. And in the very front of the picture, you can see the skukka, or the Coast Salish woolly dog. This is one of the only pictures of the skukka that exists. It's thought to have gone extinct in 1860. Largely at the hands of the Hudson Bay Blanket Company, because there was one of the things they didn't understand about the Coast Salish people is they actually were practicing this animal husbandry outside the villages. Any of these small little islands is where they would keep the dogs and keep them isolated from the rest of the reservation or the village dogs to keep that breed pure and harvest that fur. And so these Coast Salish blankets, are amazing to me. I just think they're beautiful. But it was a whole textile industry, a hand cottage textile industry that the Coast Salish people had. And only now at the Royal Museum in Vancouver or at the Burke Museum with DNA testing have they verified what the natives have said, that these blankets were made with mostly dog's fur and not all mountain goat wool. They're kind of woven in with cedar and mountain goat wool, but the fur of the dog, it's just it's a little bit of our history that's lost. I sure wish they could CRISPR up me a little skukka dog. I'd love to have one of those if anybody's listening. These are some of my blanket panels. These are unfurled cylinders. And again, back to Dale and the Hilltop program. You saw the slide of Doug Burgess, who I work with and is a great, he's in the back. We're really young. My friend Trent is in the front. We're all sort of puppies in this picture. But one of the things that Dale has done, obviously you can't argue with the legacy of his work, but one of the most amazing things he's done is start the Pilchuck Glass School and also the Hilltop Glass program, where glass and art itself is not like trade school, but you may at the end of it find a path for your life, and being able to share that with young people. I hire a lot of these young kids to help me with my green money today, and it's more than money. It's not a job. It's kind of making the decision to become an artist is a gamble, and there's not always a big payoff at the end. But that being able to share that with people is like artwork has really saved my life. This is the first Lummi Youth Retreat at Pilchuck. This is a program I started with Tina Alfiero This is probably about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and this is from the Lummi Youth Academy and the Lummi High School. This is a thing we did with Naya in Portland at Lynn Reed's studio. And just bringing these Native kids into glasses is kind of this is my chance to hold the door open for the people that have held the door open for me. I didn't just get here I got here by the graces of a really loving community, and I didn't get here alone. And I think a lot of people have that similar story. This is my sister. One of her talents that, again, you won't see here in this studio, she's an amazing teacher. And teaching these Native kids how to blow glass, like I said, it's not a career path necessarily, but glass, the magic of glass and the Hilltop program and these programs, glass is a material that keeps you in the moment in the way that other things don't. It either works or it doesn't. It doesn't care about your feelings. It's hot, you may get burned, and you have to communicate. And being able to keep you in the moment, you're not worried about yesterday, you're not caught up about tomorrow, you're either focused or you're not. And I feel like working with kids with on the spectrum or any of these, it's a great tool, or it's a great retreat to kind of find that quiet place where you're 100% in one moment. These two girls grew up on Lummi, going to school in the same portable schools, and they're from different sides of the reservation where proverbially, like, their families just don't talk, and they're from different families, and we don't talk to them, they don't talk to us. And after a session at Pilchuck, these two girls might have been best friends, and they were completely aware of each other their whole life and had never hung out. And after this retreat, that's why I do things like this. This is the Hilltop program, again at Pilchuck. This is my family today. This is the view from Hales Pass at Lummi of the setting sun, which is large in our story. And yeah, Heishka, thanks for coming. I really do appreciate that. Awesome.
Does anyone have any questions for Dan?
Sure.
What's up?
Hey, Dan. So I got to say, I wanted to say this is one of the best, but I think this was the best artist lecture ever. I have a million questions, but I think I'm just gonna, I have to choose which one.
You guys get that recorded? This is Pete, dude. Pete West just had,
So I've just read a book which I was really wrestling with. It was written in '77, and it was about artists using sort of pacifism to survive. It's a dystopian, futuristic novel, but to survive a very violent attack on the artistic sensibility. It's called Them. It's a really fantastic book. And when I saw your auntie, or I think it was, the woman who
Aunt Fran, yeah.
Yeah, who was doing the
Fran James, yeah.
and keeping the language. I was wrestling with the pacifism in this book, and I was just going to ask you, was that her attitude? Obviously, she was extremely strong.
Strong woman.
Incredible violence, but was her way of dealing with keeping the language and keeping the techniques, was that a sort of a pacifist way, like a quiet way? Like you were saying,
You're just holding on to the only thing that you've got.
Right.
And it's like spoken at night in this little unassuming weaving circle. Her son, Chief Salit, or Bill James, who I can only speak about now, because in our Lummi culture, you don't talk about people till they've been dead. It was a big tradition to burn your possessions, to send them with you. And, so when he passed away, it kind of goes underneath the radar. Like no one knows the chief passed away because you don't talk about it. You don't share pictures on Facebook, and you don't say their name out loud so that they can cross over. But now, I can't say enough how Vi Hilbert from Upper Skagit is another auntie, and these aunties, Lillian Pitt, these guys are survivors of a different, you like to think that things like that in 1800s, like that was a long time ago, like literally women voting, suffragette women, like kids, like it's not that long ago, people that were alive. My mom, not that, in her 70s, remembers, the segregation that people lived through, and it's like, We like to, you know, we are survivors of that, you know, like their life, like those stories are so important to hear, that oral tradition. And was she passive? I think they were just kind of getting by with what they could. And it's amazing that the hero is a woman in a little blanket and a shawl weaving a basket. But that's how our story, that's how we survived through that, you know. So was it passive? I mean, I don't know. I think it's brave
Oh, yeah.
to risk whooping, you know, getting a literal whooping, you know what I mean? Like her son went to Chemawa School, which is one of the local Indian schools, and you know later went to IAIA in Santa Fe, and I think that's the same as a lot of these tribal cultures as they struggle to survive, you know, to find themselves in an era where we all have a computer in our pocket that does the load of remembering every phone number we've got. Like we're in this new era, and our native kids are growing up in this era too. But those stories are really important to keep you. It's just like lighting the candle on Sabbath, you know, like these people, you know, they just are trying to hang on to the parts of their culture that give them that identity, you know. So I think that's really brave.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Please, Barbara.
You were so lucky, as you said, to have those photographs of
Yeah.
your family.
Yeah.
And I've never seen those types of beautiful clothing and patterns.
Yeah, you wouldn't know the whole textile industry of Coast Salish blankets. It took, so in the tribal tradition, if you've been to a powwow today or a potlatch and everybody hands out fleece blankets, that's a carrying on of that tradition, because to get that gifting culture, much like in Japan, they have these potlatches where they out-gift each other and like who spent the most and what did you give me, but that's that bind, that tying bind, that like that your commitment to the community, and getting a blanket was the biggest gift you could get. Like, was your difference between health and sickness, you know, that being warm in the winter, to make one of those blankets takes a year, you know, it's like, it was a really esteemed gift when these people had very little possessions that weren't potentially communal possessions. Yeah, a blanket was a really status item. And now they give out fleece blankets by the hundreds, but I think that carrying over of that, you know, continuing of that culture. I mean, look at the Pendleton Blanket Company. They've made a whole living off of the native blanket design and pattern and that sort of thing.
Do any of those kinds of clothes exist anywhere in museums?
Yeah, you can see them at the museum. The dancing regalia of the Setting Sun Dance Troupe, they have an amazing version of it and at the Burke Museum. And kids today, like the culture is having you may not see it. That's why I would invite you guys all to go to the Stomach or any of these events. The kids today, these longhouses out here, Port Gamble, Suquamish, they're making these things. And it's they're also like Louis Gong, making the running shoes for Brooks. There's a lot of Manitoba Boot Company. There's a lot of native re-emergence of native fashion. I mean, they've borrowed so much, like Pendleton, they've borrowed so much from native design and fashion along the way. Bethany Yellowbone too. There's a bunch of different, bunch of different native designers. If you ever go to Santa Fe Indian Market, they have an amazing fashion show.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm curious, when Edward Curtis was photographing the native tribes, did he get up to the Lummi?
Yeah, there's one photo named Lummi Woman, which is great. Dale, who I work for, has an amazing collection of Curtis photos or prints, glycine or silver prints, I believe they're called, or something like that. I'm fortunate to have one or two in my collection, and they were controversial because some of those are taken out of context, but I think you can't argue with the fact that it's amazing to see how powerful those pictures are, and whether or not they're wearing the appropriate regalia. The insight to take those pictures was amazing. The photos of my family were not taken by Curtis, but a lot of them, the photos of Frank Hilaire, although he was a really prominent figure, he actually took the name Frank Hilaire from a man in Bellingham who he helped build his house. He goes, well, what's your name? It's Haytaluk. And he goes, well, what's your real name? And he goes, well, what's your name? He said, Frank Hilaire. And so that became his name too. He goes, I'm Frank Hilaire too. And those pictures were controversial, but that window into that time is these pictures are priceless to me. There's hundreds of them. And because he was such a prominent figure at the time, there's a lot of photographs of him. And he was a slave, which means something different in Lummi or native cultures to be a slave. If you read any of these amazing books of people captured by natives in the plains or Chiricahua, there's a great book about a woman who was captured and raised by the Chiricahua. When they tried to steal her back twice to European culture in the East Coast, she went back. And being a slave meant something different. He was just of a low caste, and he escaped from Vancouver Island in Saanich. His brothers were trying to kill him because he inherited a really powerful name in the family. And he swam from Vancouver Island when he was a boy on a log over to Lummi, and his mother was Lummi and was raised as a low caste member, but became a very powerful person. And those pictures of him wouldn't be around. We just are really fortunate that the Whatcom Museum there has kind of given us free reign with him.
I got one more. But
Yeah.
other work as opposed to history.
Yeah.
I've always loved these feathers.
Oh, thank you.
And they're, a feather is so light.
Yeah.
You make very light ones too, but these are so, I didn't really have a way to describe them until I saw that image of Hilaire.
Yeah, one of my, either my great-grandfather or my grandfather, the headdress or regalia, yeah.
That was, suddenly I understood.
Yeah.
At least I had a reference.
Yeah.
They're amazing, these pieces.
Well, it's glass is it has that fragile thing, but it's also really, that big feather up there, it's such a delicate thing, but it's made with immense brute force. So it's such a crazy juxtapose. Well, if there's any more, yeah, please.
When you started down the path of glass, did you always envision bringing your history into it, or did that kind of merge?
No, and it wasn't, I started some of my early works. That's why I show them. As a mechanic, I was into I really like astronomy. I really like the turning of the planets. I really love the gears of time, like how things balance out. And, we question the politics and the daily ebb and flow, the tide of our lives. But are we in the wrong spot? Are these things that are inevitable? Or are these things that are maybe necessary for us to find out who we are? That's kind of the more conceptual version of these gears. But, I always liked, I like that thing about working on cars, just it either works or it doesn't. It's not that it's necessarily an objective truth because things can be designed poorly or whatever, but I like that timing, that clock of time, the turning of things. And so that early work is kind of where I went. And, as I kind of came into myself as an artist, like speaking with Aunt Fran and just, it's so beneficial for me. I find so much value in learning and the amount of weaving I've done and carving and just, I feel like that connects me to my ancestors.
Is it more of an evolution or a switch?
Well,
Turning on or discovering?
I think you just got to keep digging. I think it's gradual. And as you look back, you see one page to the next slide goes pretty quick, but it happens, it's down the path a little bit in my life. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I had a question just in terms of the techniques that you use. Were you focused in the very beginning on learning to glow and then over time moved into the solid working?
Yeah.
Away?
Working with Pinot was a large part of the solid transition. And just, I spent so much of my career making these on-center blown. That's how you have to become familiar with the technique, just the material. It's like this material exploration. And we're using so many of these Venetian techniques. It's such a hard medium to find your voice in though, but you literally have to pound out 1,000 hours of like, Mary Had a Little Lamb on the trombone before anybody wants to come to your recital, right? And glass is a lot like that. Like it's a tough medium to find your voice in because it's such a technical craft or skill, and it takes years to kind of develop. So, yeah, it's definitely part of the journey as you become more aware of what's available. It's how can you add your fish to the lineage of fish.
I've got one more quick.
Yeah, what's up?
Could you talk about some of the influences that your sister has? Because I know, I get the sense, and you talk so much about the Venetians and Pinot and all that.
Yeah.
But hers look different.
She's an amazing solid sculptor. And like I said, she, glass is a really physical thing too. And it's, she has she's an amazing illustrator. She could just kind of have gone that way. And I'm like, but but it's one of those things where she, I think with these new pieces has really found that balance of, she's really, pardon me, focused and detail oriented, and so she, these weavings were really, I think it's a great way for her glass work to kind of, because it's such a focused, detailed thing. And I think that's a great, like that cast piece you did that's over a ton of glass, that's like just literally brute force, that makes something like that. Even myself, I know I can't go on forever, like making a lot of these works. They have my body has a timeline that I can't make them, or until I turn it over to someone else that I work with to physically make them. But yeah, her, I think that these pieces really speak to just the hours it takes to coal work. These people have no idea. And then to go and get the harvest the cedar. There's 2 months of the year where the cedar is harvestable, and then you can't use the cedar from that year. You've got to wait and let it cure for a year before you start weaving. I mean, like I said, just making 6 feet of rope, there's 16, 20 feet of rope on that anchor. That takes so long to make, and you just have such a new respect. It's like my ancestors struggled to live, just the amount of time. Everybody's ancestor, your ancestors traveled through it's amazing that we're here. It's amazing that there's so many of us, 8 billion. I mean, it's like the amount of energy it takes to get to where you are, So I think I'm really proud of her, and I love these pieces. Yep. Aishka, thanks for coming, guys. I appreciate that.
We hope you'll stop in soon to see new works by Dan Friday and Rhea Friday, Lummi Nation glass artists, on view from April 7th through April 30th.